This is J. Krishnamurti's fourth public talk at Brockwood Park, 1973.
This is the last talk. We have been talking about so many things. Which are concerned with our daily life, with our frustrations, fears, and pleasures. And the mad world in which we live, of which unfortunately we are. And yesterday morning, we talked about a total movement of life in which is included love, death, and the endless pain of existence with its pleasures. This morning, could we talk about, or rather inquire together into this question of whether there is anything sacred we are inquiring. We are not asserting that there is something or that there is not something. We leave that to the priests or to the philosophers who speculate about these matters. But a mind which sees the transient world, which is aware that everything changes, that there is absolutely nothing permanent, neither in our relationships with each other, nor in ideas, nor in any action. However beautiful, however limited, however shallow. And when we see all this, the suffering, and no ending to that suffering, to the conflict, to the endless pain, and the pursuit of pleasure, the old age and death, and nothing is permanent. Everything is in a flux. Seeing all this, both verbally and non-verbally, being conscious of what is going on, both outwardly and inwardly, one inevitably asks, is there really anything that is truly holy, that is really sacred? And this morning, I would like to go into that. We are together going to share this problem, though we may not have asked that question, or you may have vaguely felt towards it, or you are already assured by propaganda, by tradition, by constant repetition of certain dogma, rituals, that there is something sacred. But a mind that has come to a conclusion that there is something that is holy, obviously has not really is not really free to discover what is sacred. And I think that is an important question. Because if we can, through investigation, through tracing out the innumerable inquiries and the various conclusions that man has come to, and if we could discard everything that man has said that is sacred, or everything that thought has put together and called it sacred, the book, the image, the idea, the ideology, the belief in God or no belief in God, if we could discard all that, then our minds are capable of inquiring, investigating into this question. Because if we accept everything, if we say everything is matter of time, matter of destruction, decay, corruption, then life as a whole not only has not very great meaning, but is rather shallow. And one tries to fill that shallowness, that emptiness, with something that is called sacred. So if we could discard all that, not verbally but actually, in our life, totally discard everything that man has called sacred. They have done it in India to an extraordinary extent. 1,000 images, 1,000 rituals, 1,000 gurus, 1,000 systems. Here too, in the Christian world, there is all this ideology, belief, saviors, rituals, with their dogmas, superstitions, and astonishing cruelty. If we could put aside that, then the mind is capable of really investigating and not experiencing, because that word experience is a very suspect word. But come upon something, the mind is capable of this thing called sacred. To find that out, to come upon it, there are certain obvious things are necessary. If one is at all really, deeply, profoundly serious. Otherwise, what we're talking about has no meaning whatsoever. Don't play with it. Unless you are desperately serious. Because this demands tremendous attention, tremendous care, a sense of dedication to find out. So the first thing, it seems to me, is necessary, is order. Please don't translate that word into what you think is order. Or adjust yourself to a word that has lost its meaning. So we're going to inquire together what is order and what is virtue. Because that's the very foundation of this inquiry. If there is no virtue, no order, the mind cannot possibly go further, because it can go further only in illusion, in deception, in hypocrisy. So we must together find out what is order. In a permissive world, there is no order. You do what you want to do. That's the reaction to your Victorianism. You're being controlled, shaped, and driven. And the reaction is to do what you want to do, without any restriction, without any sense of order. And the order to a communist world is to obey. To conform to a pattern. And that pattern is established by killing millions and millions and millions of people. China, in Russia, in all the satellite countries, and so on. And to establish what they call order is to destroy people. And destroy people to bring about what they consider a society which will be perfect. This is what's happening. That's order. Then to the priest, to the whole religious groups, the sects, the gurus, order is control. Control, subjugate, suppress, conform, imitate, believe. And such order is total disorder. We're going to go into that. So what is the nature of order? Is it a blueprint which we accept and conform to? That's what we have been doing. Are we sharing this thing together? Because if we don't share what is being said, then don't listen. It isn't worth it. It has no meaning. But if you share what is being said, which doesn't mean you agree or disagree, because in sharing together, We are inquiring, thinking, observing, investigating together. Together is important because we create the world together. We are together in our relationships. We cannot do anything by ourselves. It's only together we can create, we can build, we can investigate. So if you are sharing this, that is, what is the meaning of order? We can see the order which the communist world demands is not order. It is conformity, suppression, and the threat of death or prison or a hospital. The order which the religious groups, whether they are Catholics and so on, throughout the world, again have this sense of complete control. Control and by that, through that process, discover the image which they have created. So, and the permissive society in which we live, which is also a reaction, to them there is no order. They live in constant confusion. So, in investigating together this word, what does it mean? Does it come about through permissiveness, doing anything you want to do? Which is what you're doing. Only occasionally yielding to circumstances and trying to battle against the circumstances, throw bombs and all the rest of it. Destroy what is called the establishment and hoping to create a new establishment. Is that order? Or is it disorder? And the communist world, with their dictatorship and conformity and absolute obedience, the threat of mental hospital, all that's going on, is that order? And is it order? The structure which the mind has created, and that structure is called the religious organization. Is that order? Or all that is disorder? The permissive man or the woman, the communist, suppression, obedience, and the destructions of millions and millions of people. The Catholics have also done. Probably, as we said the other day, Christians have killed more people than anybody else probably in the world. Perhaps not more than the communists. And when you observe all this, and you see that total disorder. So, what is disorder? Because by investigating what is not, we'll find out what is. Do you understand? By understanding, investigating what is not love, then there is love. Love is not jealousy, love is not pleasure, love is not, as we said yesterday morning, love is not desire, the pursuit of jealousy, hatred, antagonism, aggression. And when all that is not in you, then the other is, the other blossoms, flowers. So in the same way, in understanding what is disorder, out of that comes the flowering of order, not according to any pattern, self-created or imposed. So now we're going to inquire into what is disorder, what brings about disorder. Any conflict is disorder. Conflict between nations or between groups of people, between different classes of people, between ideologies, between the division as the me and the you. Any conflict is essentially breeds disorder. And we live in conflict. We have accepted conflict. From our education, our whole way of living is the field of disorder, of conflict. And control is disorder. Please listen carefully, because most of permissive society has no control. They've thrown all that overboard. But they are not orderly, virtuous, clear. We'll go into that. So, where there is division and therefore conflict, that is one of the causes of disorder. Another cause of disorder is control. Control implies suppression, conformity to a pattern established by yourself through your own experience or the experience of another. Where there is control, there is contradiction. And control implies a controller. And the controller is the controlled. Right? Are we going on together? Or is it all Greek? Controller is the controlled. The controller is a fragment of thought which says, I must control the other fragment. But it's still within the field of thought. So, where there is control, suppression, conformity, imitation, all that's implied in that word. The controller and the controlled. In that there is division and therefore conflict. So that breeds disorder, conforming to an ideal, to an ideology, to a formula, conclusion, and that brings conflict and therefore disorder. And therefore which arises from that question, whether a human being can live in this world without no control at all, not permissiveness. We'll come back to that question. Disorder comes into being when there is fear and the pursuit of pleasure. Obviously, when the mind is only concerned with pleasure and the pursuit of it, there must inevitably be aggression, violence, fear, and all the network which pleasure brings about. That is also disorder. And the action based on a conclusion and an ideology is disorder. Right? So can the mind observe this disorder of action which approximates itself to an ideology, control which implies suppression, conformity, conflict between the controller and the controlled, and the division between thought and the idea. All that is disorder. And in the understanding of that disorder, the flowering of order takes place, which is not conformity, which is not this terrible drill, but the understanding, the investigation, the awareness, the attention to disorder in our life. That one of the causes of disorder is this demand for experience. I'm sorry to upset all your apple cart. What is experience? Which most people want. You have experiences of every day. The office, the factory, the sexual experiences, the fears, the incidents, the accidents. You have every kind of experience if you have lived 30, 40 years. And being bored with all that, you want something more. Either you want to experience through drugs, experience some kind of meditative illusion. And when you experience, who is the experiencer? You following all this? Are we together? Please. There's a lot more to have to talk this morning. I've just begun. So if you miss this, you won't go further. Because this is very important. We are laying the foundation to what is called meditation. If you haven't done this, you cannot meditate. You don't know what it means. You can play with it. Sit under trees, cross-legged, breathe properly, and all that kind of business. You can sit for 10,000 years, do that, and you won't know what meditation is. But unless you lay the foundation, not on sand, but in depth, mind then will be caught in a network of illusions, deceptions, and that has no validity, that is not true. So unless you actually in your daily life lay this, don't meditate. That's mere escape, just game that you're playing with. It's a form of self-hypnosis. So, we said experience is one of the activities of disorder. As we said, most of us are bored with our life. But our life has no meaning as it is now. And the mind wants more experience, something transcendental, something beautiful, something everlasting, something, glorious. But it has not investigated who is the experiencer. Until it understands who is the experiencer, whatever it experiences is still within the field of the known. Therefore, it's nothing new. I don't know if you follow all this. So we must investigate who is the experiencer. And he must be capable of recognizing the experience. Otherwise, it's not an experience. So the experiencer is the entity that recognizes. He can recognize only that which he has known. He cannot possibly recognize something new. Therefore, what he is seeking through experience is the furthering of what is known. Oh, come on, sir. And that's one of the factors of disorder. Now, can the mind see all this? Not accept it, not as an idea, but actually in our daily life, see this thing. Disorder caused by the demand and the pursuit of experience as enlightenment, as truth, as God, as whatever you will. The conflict between action and the idea, between the controller and the controlled. and the conflict in relationship. The conflict between two images, the one that you have and the one that the other has. All that is disorder. And out of that understanding of the disorder comes order, which is a living thing. And therefore virtue is something alive, living, changing, moving. And without that virtue, without that, because virtue cannot be cultivated. You cannot possibly cultivate humility. If you do, you are cultivating subtle forms of vanity. As virtue cannot be cultivated, but it blossoms only when there is no disorder inwardly. And without this basic foundation, meditation, which is really a marvelous thing if this is laid, then we can talk about meditation. Then we can investigate what is meditation, which is so essential to find out, to come upon that thing which is sacred. Right? Have we come so far together? Please come on. It's a hot morning and a lovely morning, full of shadows and great beauty. And beauty is not just experiencing. You cannot experience beauty. It is there for you to see it. But if you want to experience in terms of beauty and romanticism and expression, then it's not beauty, it's merely a furthering of your own conditioning response. So, a mind that wants to, a mind that is aware of disorder, and therefore out of that awareness the flowering of order, which is virtue, when that is really deeply and honestly laid, then we can go into this question of whether there is anything sacred. To come upon that, you must investigate what time is and what thought is. Can you bear all this morning? You aren't tired? Don't be. I'll go on. We said we must investigate thought and time. Unless time has a stop, the mind cannot perceive anything sacred, anything new. So we must inquire whether thought has any relationship to time, and what is time? Because it's very important, this. There is obviously the time by the watch, the day, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Planning, going from here to there, planning to do certain things, to learn a language, to learn how to drive a car, to do any technological work, you must have time. You must have time to do yoga properly. You know what that word means? Which you all practice, some of you do, I see, doing some crazy things under trees. Do you know what that word means? It means to join. Yoking together. Yoking an oxen, two oxen, to join. I'm sure it means something entirely different. Because they have translated as joining to the body and the soul. The Atman, the higher self, and the lower self. And to do that, you must do proper breathing, exercise, all that business. A false conception of division and then the joining. You understand? And it may mean, really, a sense of total harmony. But that's... So we are investigating what time is. Because without understanding that, if the mind is not free of time, it cannot possibly look into something which is timeless, which is maybe sacred. You understand? So the mind must clearly understand what time is. All this is meditation, you understand, not just one part. The whole of this morning's talk is the movement in meditation. What is time apart from the chronological time? Time is movement from here to there, psychologically, as well as physically from here to that house. So, the movement between this and that is time. The space between this and that, the covering of that is time. The movement to that is time. So, all movement is time. Both physically, going from here to Paris, New York, whatever you will, wherever you will, requires time. And also, psychologically, to change what is into what should be requires time. The movement, at least we think so. So time is movement in space created by thought as this and achieving that. Thought then is time. Thought is movement in time. Come on, sirs. Does this mean anything to any of you? You're coming, we are journeying together. I'll go on, I won't ask anymore. please, this requires tremendous attention, care, a sense of non-personal, non-pleasurable, where desire doesn't enter into it at all. That requires great care. And that care brings its own order, which is its own discipline. So, thought is movement between what is and what should be. Thought is time to cover that space. And as long as there is the division between this and that, psychologically, the movement is time of thought. So thought is time as movement, right? And is there time as movement, as thought, when there is only observation of what is, which is the observation as the observer and the observed, not as the observer and the observed, but only the observation without the movement of going beyond what is. Are you getting this? Are you all paralyzed? Because it's very important for the mind to understand this. Because thought can create most marvelous images of that which is sacred and holy, which all religions have done. All religions are based on thought. All religions are the organization of thought in belief, in dogma, in ritual. So unless there is complete understanding of this thought as time and movement, the mind cannot possibly go beyond itself. As we said, we are trained, educated, drilled into changing what is into what should be. The ideal. And the word ideal comes from the word idea, which means to see. Only that. Not draw an abstraction from what you see, but actually remain with what you see. So we are trained to change what is into what should be. That training is the movement of thought to cover the space between what is and what should be, and that takes time. That whole movement of thought in space is time necessary to change what is to what should be. The observer is the observed, therefore there is nothing to change. You won't get it. I'll go on. I'll keep my eyes shut because I'll go on. Because there is only what is. The observer doesn't know what to do with what is. Therefore, He tries various methods to change what is, controls what is, tries to suppress actually what is. But the observer is the observed. The what is the observer. Like anger, jealousy exists. Jealousy is also the observer. Jealousy isn't separate from the observer. Both are one. So, when there is no movement to change what is, you say movement as thought in time, when thought perceives that there is no possibility of changing what is, then that which is what is ceases entirely, because the observer is the observed. You go into this very deeply, you will see it yourself. It's really quite simple. I dislike someone. So the dislike is different from me and the you. The entity that dislikes is dislike itself. It is not separate. And when thought says, I must get over my dislike, then it's movement in time to get over that which actually is, which is created by thought. So the observer, the entity, and the thing called dislike are the same. Therefore, there is complete immobility. Which is not the immobility of staticism. It is completely motionless, therefore completely silent. So time as movement, time as thought achieving a result, has come totally to an end. Therefore, action is instantaneous. So the mind has laid the foundation and is free from disorder. And therefore there is the flowering and the beauty of virtue. That is the basis. And in that foundation is the relationship between you and another. In that relationship there is no activity of image. There is only relationship, not the image adjusting itself to the other image. And there is only what is, and not the changing of what is. The changing of what is, or transforming what is the movement of thought in time. Then, when you've come to that point, the mind and the brain cells also become totally still. The brain, which holds the memories, experiences, knowledge, can and must function in the field of the known. But now the mind, that brain, is free from the activity of time and thought. Then the mind is completely still. All this takes place without effort. All this must take place without any sense of discipline, control. All that belongs to disorder. You know what we are saying is something totally different from what your gurus, your masters, your Zen philosophy, your all that. Because in this there is no authority. There is no following another. Because if you follow somebody, you are not only destroying yourself but also the other. Therefore, a religious mind has no authority whatsoever. But it has got intelligence. And it applies that intelligence where in the world of action there is authority of the doctor, the scientist, the man who teaches you how to drive. Otherwise there is no authority. There is no guru. So the mind then, if you have gone as deeply as that, then the mind, having established order in relationship, and that order is virtue, then understanding the whole complex disorder of our lives, of our daily lives, and in the comprehension, in the awareness of that disorder, in which there is no choice, out of that comes beauty of virtue, which is not cultivated, which is not brought about by thought. Therefore that virtue is love, order. And if the mind has not established that as with deep roots, which is immovable, unchangeable, then you can inquire into this whole movement of time, as we somewhat did. Then the mind is completely still. There is no observer, there is no experiencer, there is no thinker. And coming to that point, there are various forms of sensory and extrasensory perceptions. Clairvoyance, healing, all kinds of things take place, but they're all secondary issues, and a mind that is really concerned in the discovery of what is truth, what is sacred, will never touch all that. because they are secondary issues. So, the mind then is free to observe. Then there is that thing which man has sought through centuries, the unnameable, the timeless. And no description, no verbal expression of it. The image that is created by that, by thought, completely and utterly ceases. Because there is no entity that wants to express it in words. That the mind, your mind, can only discover or come upon it when you have this strange thing called love, compassion. Not only to your neighbor, but to the animal, the trees, to everything. Then such a mind itself becomes sacred. Don't want to ask questions, do you? In conflict there comes resolution. No, madam, no, madam. We've gone into that. Madam, forgive me, but we went into that this morning. I know we are conditioned to accept life in conflict. And we said that conflict creates disorder. It's only when the mind is not in conflict there is order. And that order cannot come into being without understanding what is disorder, which conflict has created in different ways. Conflict in relationship, conflict between action and idea, conflict as the me and the you, we and they, conflict between various ideologies, conflict between various religions. All that has produced appalling disorder, madness, violence, brutality, war. In understanding all that, there is order. That is, to understand is to see what is actually is, and when you see what is, then action is immediate. You are no longer an Englishman or a Jew, Arab, French, or German. You're a human being without a label. How do I reconcile, madam? What?
With the process of evolution.
How do I reconcile This with the process of evolution. Evolving what? From the monkey, to the higher ape, to what we are now? We have evolved from that. At least what the scientists, biologists and the archaeologists say. We have evolved. We've got most marvelous instrument, the organ, the organism, extraordinarily sensitive, which we are carefully destroying through our pleasure, through taste. And we've got a most astonishing thing called the brain, which has been conditioned by the culture in which you live, to fight, to struggle, to battle, to call ourselves Hindus, Indians, or Americans, Russians, all that. Which is trained to battle, to be aggressive, to kill. We have evolved. Physically we have evolved. Is there evolution, evolving, going further, psychologically? Or there is no tomorrow for a person who has understood this, what we have talked about. Progress is a dreadful word. I was told it meant originally to enter into a strange country fully armed. Progress to go forward. Physically, we have evolved tremendously. And some great many scientists say physically there is no further evolution. Can't develop a third eye or 4 legs or whatever it is. But psychologically, inwardly, is there evolution at all? Have you evolved psychologically? Evolved. That is, you are no longer brutal. You are no longer desire to kill somebody. No longer have the desire to kill an animal to eat. Divide. You follow? Have you evolved? Perhaps you have evolved in having more bathrooms. But otherwise, have you evolved at all? Or the whole idea, psychologically evolving, is totally illusory. Me getting better. Me becoming more noble. The me is put together by words. The me is series of experiences, knowledge, memories which are the past. The me is the past, the dead thing which is active all the time. Oh my Lord. And you call that progress. Me improving. And therefore, when you are trying to improve yourself, there is more conflict in you. But when you see what you are actually, shallow, empty, petty, mediocre, repeating words of others, nothing that you have found for yourself. See actually what is, and see that what is the observer. There is no division between the observer and the observed. Then there is complete transformation of what is. Then your mind is totally different. That is real transformation, not evolution. Not the evolution of me getting a little better, a little more cunning, a little more, all that stupid stuff that goes on. So, the mind that is serious, the mind that has observed the world and itself, and this observation takes place only in relationship between you and another, and seeing the total disorder of our lives, of our misery, and the endless sorrow in which we are caught, and seeing the sorrow and the ending of sorrow. Then the ending of sorrow is the beginning of wisdom. And out of that comes that which is timeless, which is nothing whatever to do with you and me. It is for the mind to come upon it.